Be alone with yourself, everyone. Today I want to talk to you about something that's often overlooked in our fast-paced, noisy world. Being alone with yourself. Imagine sitting in a quiet room, no phone buzzing, no music playing, no one talking, just you and your thoughts. At first it might feel strange, even uncomfortable. We're so used to being stimulated every second of the day that silence feels unnatural. But in that stillness, something powerful begins to happen. Without the constant noise of the outside world, you start to hear something you may not have noticed in a while: your own voice. In our daily lives, we are constantly absorbing. We scroll through social media, watch others live their lives, read articles that tell us what we should think, wear, feel, or become. It's easy to lose track of who we really are beneath all those layers of influence. We start to mirror what we see, wanting what others want, chasing goals that aren't truly ours, fitting into molds that don't quite fit. But when you remove the distractions, you begin to peel back those layers. Being alone with yourself forces you to confront your own thoughts and beliefs. What do you value when no one is watching? What dreams do you hold when nobody is telling you what's realistic or smart? What kind of person do you want to be? Not to impress others, but because it feels right to you. These are the kinds of questions that don't get answered in the middle of a busy day or a loud conversation. They rise up in silence, slowly and honestly. When you give yourself the space to listen, there's a kind of self-awareness that only comes in solitude. It's not about isolation or shutting people out. It's about tuning in. And sometimes it's hard. You might discover parts of yourself you've avoided. Insecurities, regrets, doubts. But facing them is the first step toward understanding and healing. Knowing yourself means recognizing both the light and the shadow. It means being real, not perfect. Over time, the more you sit with yourself, the clearer things become. You stop measuring your worth against someone else's highlight reel. You begin to make decisions based on what feels true for you. And you gain the confidence to walk your own path, even if it looks different from everyone else's. There's a quiet kind of freedom in knowing who you are. It's not loud or flashy. It's steady. It's peaceful. It gives you a sense of direction that doesn't shake every time the world changes around you. Because when you've taken the time to truly know yourself, you don't get lost as easily. So give yourself that gift. Be alone, not out of loneliness, but out of love. Take time to sit in the quiet without distraction and ask yourself, who am I? Really, you might be surprised by how much wisdom lives inside you, just waiting for a moment of silence to speak. There's a quiet kind of power that grows when you spend time alone. It doesn't shout. It doesn't need to be seen. It simply lives within you, becoming stronger each time you choose to sit with yourself rather than run from your thoughts. This is what it means to build inner strength. Learning to be your own support, your own friend, your own calm in the storm. Being alone isn't always easy. In fact, at times it can feel like the hardest thing to do. When you're surrounded by others or constantly occupied, you don't have to confront what's going on inside. You can keep busy, distracted, entertained. But when you strip all of that away, when it's just you and your mind, you're faced with the truth of what you're carrying. And that moment, as uncomfortable as it may be, is where strength is born. Inner strength comes from meeting yourself where you are, without judgment. It's about facing the thoughts you usually push away and learning not to fear them. It's realizing that you can survive moments of doubt, insecurity, or sadness, not by escaping them, but by sitting through them and understanding them. Over time, this process makes you emotionally resilient. You stop being afraid of your own feelings. You begin to trust that no matter what happens around you, you have the tools to handle it. In solitude, you also become less dependent on external validation. You stop needing constant reassurance or approval because you start validating yourself. You realize that your worth doesn't come from how many people text you, like your post, or agree with your choices. It comes from the quiet confidence you build when you know you're making decisions that are right for you, even if no one else understands. This self-reliance isn't about shutting people out. It's about learning to stand on your own so that when you let others in, it's out of choice, not need. You're no longer looking for someone to complete you or rescue you. You already feel whole. And that makes your connections more genuine, more balanced. Think of solitude like training. Each time you spend time alone, truly alone, not just physically, but mentally, you're strengthening a part of yourself that can't be touched by chaos. You're building the kind of stability that doesn't waver when life throws unexpected things your way. You're learning that peace doesn't have to be found in a perfect moment. It can be created within you. That strength becomes a foundation. It carries you through hard times. It keeps you grounded when the world feels overwhelming. And most importantly, it reminds you that you are capable of so much more than you realize, not because someone told you, but because you felt it, lived it, and proven it to yourself. So don't be afraid to be alone. Don't rush to fill the silence. Let it shape you. Let it teach you. In that quiet, you'll find a version of yourself you didn't know existed. Strong, steady, and unshakably whole. We live in a world that moves fast. There's always something next, another task, another notification, another distraction. In all this constant motion, it's easy to ignore what we're feeling. We push our emotions aside, telling ourselves we'll deal with them later. But later rarely comes, and over time, all those unprocessed feelings start to weigh us down. That's why being alone with yourself is so important. It gives you the space and quiet you need to finally feel what you've been avoiding. When you're alone, with no one to perform for, no conversations to maintain, and no noise to drown out your thoughts, your emotions rise to the surface, sometimes gently and sometimes like a wave. It might feel uncomfortable at first. We've been taught to be strong, to stay positive, to keep going. But real strength doesn't mean ignoring your feelings. It means facing them, understanding them, and letting them move through you. Emotions are not meant to be bottled up. They're messages, signals from within, telling you something important. Sadness might be asking you to slow down and care for your heart. Anger might be pointing to a boundary that was crossed. Anxiety could be a sign that you're living out of alignment with your values. But you can't decode any of that if you don't stop long enough to listen. Solitude gives you that chance. When you sit in stillness, you create a kind of emotional mirror. You begin to notice what's really going on beneath the surface. Maybe you've been more stressed than you realized. Maybe you're carrying grief that you've never fully acknowledged. Maybe you're feeling joy, but have been too busy to notice it. In this space, you can feel it all, without judgment, without interruption. And when you allow yourself to fully feel your emotions, something incredible happens. They start to shift. Emotions, when felt, begin to move. They loosen their grip. What once felt like a heavy burden becomes something lighter, more manageable. You start to understand yourself better, and that understanding brings peace. Processing your emotions doesn't always mean having the answers. Sometimes it's just about sitting with your feelings, naming them, and letting them exist. You might cry, journal, or simply breathe through a wave of feeling. The point is to make space, to stop pretending everything's fine and allow yourself to be human. Over time, this practice builds emotional intelligence. You become more in tune with your inner world. You recognize your triggers, your patterns, your needs, and that awareness helps you show up better, not only for yourself, but for others too. You respond instead of reacting. You listen more deeply. You hold space with more compassion. So give yourself permission to slow down. Find a quiet place. Be alone. Not to escape the world, but to reconnect with yourself. Let your emotions speak. They are not your enemies. They are your teachers. And in learning to feel, you begin to heal. In the quiet moments when you're alone with yourself, something beautiful starts to happen. Without the pressure to respond to messages, the noise of the crowd, or the endless scroll of information, your mind finally has space to breathe. And in that space, creativity begins to stir. Ideas you didn't even know were inside you start to rise to the surface. Clarity, once clouded by constant stimulation, begins to shine through. This is the hidden power of solitude. It's not just peaceful, it's productive in the most meaningful way. When we're constantly distracted, our minds stay in reactive mode. We move from one thing to the next, barely stopping to think deeply or let our thoughts fully form. Creativity requires something different. It needs room to wander, to daydream, to connect dots in new ways. When you're alone, especially without devices or interruptions, your brain shifts gears. It moves from reacting to creating. And often, that's when your most original thoughts come to life. Think about when your best ideas show up. It's often in the shower, on a walk, or late at night when everything's quiet. That's not a coincidence. In those moments, you're mentally free. You're not absorbing, you're accessing. You're reaching into the deeper layers of your mind, the parts where imagination lives, where intuition speaks, where innovation is born. Solitude opens that door. But it's not just about creativity. It's about clarity too. When you're constantly exposed to other people's opinions, lifestyles, and choices, it's easy to lose sight of your own direction. You start second-guessing yourself, wondering if you're doing enough or doing the right thing. When you take time to be alone, you remove those outside influences. You can hear your own thoughts more clearly. You can ask yourself important questions. What matters to me? What do I actually want? Am I living in a way that aligns with my values? Clarity doesn't always come in a flash. Sometimes it unfolds slowly, like fog lifting from a quiet landscape. But the more you return to solitude, the more you notice your inner compass. It becomes easier to make decisions. Not because you've figured everything out, but because you've learned to trust yourself. Solitude also allows for reflection, which is essential to growth. When you're alone, you can review your experiences, process your mistakes, and celebrate your wins. You start to see patterns, recognize what's working, and understand what needs to change. That reflection brings focus and direction. It gives your actions purpose. So don't underestimate the value of time spent alone. It's not wasted time. It's where ideas are born and where truth is uncovered. It's where your voice becomes clearer and your mind becomes lighter. In a world that rewards speed and noise, choosing stillness is a radical act. But it's in that stillness that you rediscover your creative spark, your clarity of purpose, and the quiet brilliance that's been inside you all along.